Almost 6 years have passed since 9/11 without another attack inside America. So when it comes to the war on terror, are radical Islamists losing their ability to carry out large-scale attacks, or as evidenced by the failed UK terror plots, just changing their tactics? Our next guest says it's a little of both. He's a former CIA advisor and the president of TotalSecurity.us. Jeffrey Beatty. Sorry, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, how are terrorists changing their tactics? Are you saying they're moving away perhaps from airplanes and more to these individualized attacks?
Well, I think, Molly, what we have to recognize is that we're not facing a big monolithic terrorist enemy. There are people in the Al-Qaeda camp who believe in hitting the home run. They want to have operations that result in thousands of casualties. But there are also people who are now beginning to get more influence within the movement that believe in more of the death by 1,000 cuts, the smaller operations, the type of thing that happened in London last year in the subway system and before that in Spain. And those attacks have, in fact, proved to be effective. They were effective in encouraging the Spanish to withdraw their forces from Iraq. So I think we're going to have to be a country that can both walk and chew gum at the same time. We're going to have to be working against the big threat as well as working against these smaller threats, which are becoming more and more, I think, the way the enemy is going to go.
But it seems like those smaller attacks might be even more difficult to prevent than the big spectacular ones.
Well, you're absolutely right. And just because the attacks in London weren't successful, you have to remember that there is a learning curve when terrorists conduct operations. The first World Trade Center attack in 1993 wasn't successful, but they went back, they planned, they thought about it, they rehearsed, they prepared, and 8 years later they were able to press home a successful attack. Now, these same individuals obviously are in custody, but there's a lot of others who will be looking at this operation and say, you know what, that fuel air bomb, too hard to do. Let me go back and look at something that was successful, the Timothy McVeigh attack. And they could mount those types of attacks using large vehicle bombs, using smaller package bombs like Eric Robert Rudolph did at the Olympic Park, using them in transit properties and in public gathering places. And those are harder to recognize, but we're not without some tools that can actually help us to defend against that.
What are those tools?
In fact, well, yes. In fact, since 9/11, we've personally been involved in training programs that have trained over 600,000 people in the transportation industry to identify the operational acts that go into attacks. What does casing activity look like? What does rehearsal activity look like? What are the operational acts that are visible in the 11th hour of a potential attack? And if you train individuals who are experts in their domain, in the transit properties, in the airports, and if you alert the public to not be in denial, to if you see something suspicious, to please report it. Don't be embarrassed.
All right.
We need to continue to do that.
We will get the word out. All right. Thank you, Jeffrey Beatty, president of TotalSecurity.us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Molly.
If you're thinking about